Romantic or creepy? If you click this video to learn more about your love life, you're in the wrong place, because today we are doing a reading summary and analysis of Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death, which just so happens to be romantic and creepy. Let's do a reading first. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only Gossamer my gown, my Tippet only Tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. So there's a lot to unpack with this poem. The first thing I want to take a look at, though, is the music behind it. So the stanzas follow in iambic tetrameter, or common time, followed by iambic trimeter. So 4 iambic feet followed by 3 iambic feet. Now, songwriters often employ this pattern, which is why these words can be overlaid to the tune of Amazing Grace. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. It's a high note for me. And Gilligan's Isle. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Now, you might not realize it by my singing, but this is an upbeat meter, this melody that it creates. Amazing Grace is the most joyful song in all of Christendom, and Gilligan's Isle is the happiest song about shipwrecks that you will ever hear. So why is it being used in a poem about death? To figure that out, we have to dive into the meaning of the poem. So let's go stanza by stanza here. In the first stanza, you notice that there's personification of death. And when you think of personification of death, you're probably thinking like Grim Reaper. But here, death presents himself as a gentleman out to court the speaker rather than a terror trying to scare or terrify her to collect her soul, right? In the second stanza, we see that the speaker is won over by death's civility. She's not powerless in this situation, but she puts away her life. It's not like it's taken from her. She puts it away for his civility. Now, it's not saying that this is a suicidal poem by any means. It's not that she's inviting death. She could not stop for death. It just so happened that death stopped for her. And when death stops for anyone, we go along with him, don't we? I love this third stanza because you get this really cool imagery here that I highlighted. And these images, when you think about them, this anaphora of we passed, we passed, we passed, they all highlight a time in a person's life. You have children at the beginning, so early in life. Then you have fields of gazing grain, which is kind of middle of life, right? Autumn time when things are harvested. And then you have the setting sun, which is, of course, representative of the end of our life. In the second half of the stanza, we see right away how important it is to look up every word in a poem. I say that all the time, and this is a great poem to illustrate that. You would have a hard time figuring out what that stanza is talking about if you didn't know that Gossamer was cobwebs spun by very tiny, small spiders. And this is what the speaker's gown is made out of. And a tippet is a long scarf that you would wear around the shoulders, which should keep you warm. But you find out that the tippet is made of tulle, which is lightweight, fine netting. So when she's dressed for death, she's dressed in very thin, not warm clothing. And you get that with the quivering and the chill there. So you can see things are getting colder, which is again representative of death, as how the body cools off after death. In the second to last stanza, we again get a really important word to pick up, cornice. Now, if you're sitting inside, if you look up where the ceiling and the wall meet, that would be the cornice of the room. So when we read that in the context of the stanza, we see that this house, which is a swelling of the ground, its roof barely visible, the cornice is in the ground. We know that this house is actually a grave because it's underground. And then the final stanza is this really interesting realization that the viewpoint is one of retrospection from a long time ago. It's been centuries that the speaker has died, and yet it feels shorter than a day, which is a far cry from the labor and the leisure of life that we got in the first half of the poem. So, what do you think of this? Is the poem innovative, creepy, morbidly romantic? Let me know in the comments below, because I think you can support all of those, but if you're writing about it, you need to find a specific stance and use the text to support whatever stance you're going with. Oh, and one more thing. Today, Dickinson might be one of the most admired poets of all time, but in her lifetime, she was admired as a master artist of baking. So it goes to show that we never know what kind of legacy we'll leave. And I think that should be very inspiring for all of us to go on and create. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more videos about poems, theater, and prose. And if you have any questions about the things I talked about, please leave them in the comments. Thanks again, and have a good one. Bye.